Thank you. Quiet. Cathy is one of the top bloggers in Washington and a kind of rising star in conservative circles in Washington and around the country. Thank you for being here. Can you give people a little bit about your background, and then we'd love your take on this?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Alabama, and I was kind of a middle of the road, normal Republican, and I actually got into Ron Paul around 2006. And started to study the Federal Reserve and its impact on interest rates and things like that. And so I moved to Washington about 2 years ago. I worked for Reason Magazine. I now work for Students for Liberty, a project of theirs called Young Voices.
My son runs Students for Liberty at Northwestern. So
oh, wonderful! Yeah.
So you direct.
I work for Young Voices, which is a project. So what we do is we try to find other commentators in the free market space. Young, we're all under 30, and get their voices heard in the mainstream media because free marketers are not well represented, especially young ones. And then in addition, I blog and commentate at CathyReisenwitz.com about free markets and social issues as well. So can I just go ahead and launch into my...
Please.
Absolutely, okay.
Yeah.
So I was invited here to speak today about one of my very favorite topics, which is Bitcoin. I've gotten into Bitcoin in the past year or so.
I'm all ears.
I was invited to speak at CryptocurrencyCon two summers ago, and didn't really know what it was. My friend Jeffrey Tucker was like, listen, there's this thing. It's free market money. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. So I started to look into it. And so, one of the things that Ron Paul really appealed to me about was the idea that, okay, first of all, the idea of currency is extremely important, right? And the currency is essential for free market innovation. Markets are essential. But what we have in the United States right now is a manipulation of markets. And so one thing that really appeals to me about Bitcoin is its ability to help us sidestep the screwing with our currency. And so I want to say, first of all, I really appreciate what these gentlemen are doing as far as trying to counteract what's going on with the Federal Reserve and our currency. But I want to talk about an alternative, something that you and I can do right now to help protect ourselves and the country. So, first of all, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin, it's more complicated than this, but as a shorthand, I like to say it is a currency built on a protocol. And when people say Bitcoin, they may be talking about one or the other or both. The protocol is extremely exciting. In fact, I think it's more exciting than the particular currency. It has the ability to create what is called smart contracts, which can be used to make property smart, which is going to, I believe, absolutely revolutionize the way that we build and enforce contracts. It's especially exciting for people who are unhappy with the way that governments build and enforce contracts. But for the purpose of today's discussion, I'm going to focus on the currency aspect of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is decentralized and peer-to-peer. So what that means is no one controls Bitcoin. No one person, no one organization, no one institution, no one. It is completely decentralized. What controls Bitcoin is the protocol. So one of the aspects of having a currency not controlled by people is that inflation is low and set. So one of the things that I actually learned very recently was that inflation rates that are high are also generally variable. And so why does that matter? Well, we all understand how important access to credit is for innovation, for economic growth, so entrepreneurs can begin and build their businesses. Access to credit is absolutely essential. Well, what a high and variable inflation rate does is it disincentivizes lending because it makes it very difficult to predict what the nominal rate of interest is going to be. So having a way to borrow and lend money in Bitcoin with a low and steady interest rate, or any currency where you can depend on the interest rate staying low and steady, is really, really exciting. So how does this interplay with the Federal Reserve? Well, the Congressional Research Service just released a really, well, not just, but a few months ago, released a really, really interesting and well-written report. I would highly recommend everybody look at it on Bitcoin and its impact, potential impact on the Federal Reserve. What they said is widespread adoption of Bitcoin could severely curtail the effectiveness of the Fed's monetary policy. In other words, good luck inflating a currency no one will use. So, one of the things that's really interesting to think about, and what we've kind of talked about a little bit, is what happens when government scoring with currency becomes impossible to ignore. So we've talked about a potential monetization of the debt, which could lead to a potential hyperinflation. So what happened in like the Weimar Republic? What people did is they began to buy things with the currency as soon as it came out that they thought would have lasting value. So a diamond is forever, but your marks are for about 5 minutes. In addition, states and cities started issuing their own currency. We can see the problems with both of those approaches right away. It's difficult to obtain diamonds. You don't know what is going to hold its value and at what level it's going to hold its value. It's very difficult to exchange in diamonds. In addition, it's very difficult if you're in one city to buy something in another city if you're using two different currencies. What I predict will happen, or what I would like to see as a realistic alternative, is that when this happens, when government messing with our currency becomes impossible to ignore, people will turn to Bitcoin instead. They'll immediately buy Bitcoin. So why do I think that this is possible, and why do I want it to happen? First of all, Bitcoin is extremely easy to buy and use. Setting up a wallet takes minutes. Learning how to exchange in Bitcoin, it's immediate. You can give someone Bitcoin immediately and feelessly. I mean, imagine that. I could give you money immediately and feelessly. In addition, Bitcoin transactions are by default more secure than credit card transactions. They're irreversible in one step. So what that means is there are no costly and problematic chargebacks, which merchants now have to deal with when they're dealing with transactions, which take up lots and lots of time and energy on the part of the merchant. They also require a lot less information, so there's a lot less information that is available to be taken in a Bitcoin transaction. And also, one thing that's really exciting that we haven't really seen the promise of yet is that Bitcoin enables microtransactions to be possible and feasible and profitable for the first time ever. So what we're seeing, for example, which might interest you, Steve, is that we're now seeing monetization schemes for content that involve micropayments for articles and tipping for authors to try to find a new way to pay for content. So, for all these reasons, all these advantages that Bitcoin has, I think that it offers an easy escape hatch to tyrannical monetary regimes. And so this is not just theory. We actually saw this happen in Cyprus. The Cyprus government decided, we have a huge debt, we need to pay it off, so what we're going to do is we're going to confiscate the wealth of all the bank accounts in our country over $10,000. And the people who had those bank accounts said, no, you're not. They took their money out of their bank accounts and put it in Bitcoin. And you actually saw an impact on the price of Bitcoin as a result of this. You had that many people buying that much Bitcoin. So what this means, what I hope this means, is that people won't have to do it. That governments, when they know that people have an attractive, easy escape hatch, that will be the result when they try to mess with the currency, that their actions will be impacted, that they will take that into account when they're deciding what they're going to be doing with citizens and their money. It's going to be very difficult to pretend QE works when people aren't using the dollars they're pumping into circulation. So, what's going to happen to the value of Bitcoin? Well, it's impossible to know because it doesn't depend on any government, on any secret organization, on any shadow group. It depends on the users. It's completely open and transparent. Every single interaction on Bitcoin is on an open ledger, a decentralized open ledger. So what I hope happens is that even if people aren't regularly buying things in Bitcoin, that everyone knows how to use it, that everyone opens a wallet, that everyone knows how to buy things, and that every retailer knows how to accept Bitcoin. Some things that are going to need to happen before Bitcoin becomes widely adopted. I think we're going to need basically institutions. We're going to need Bitcoin banks, in other words. We're going to need to find a way to transfer risk from users to merchants for transactions, for fraud, for misunderstandings, those kinds of things. Right now, all the risk is on the user, and I think that that's going to be something that hampers widespread adoption. In addition, I think we're going to need lending institutions, because right now, to borrow Bitcoin, you have to borrow it from an individual, and all the risk, again, is on the individual. So we need to consolidate risk. But one thing that I would absolutely hate to see happen is that we would repeat the same mistakes that we've made with the dollar banking system in Bitcoin. I would hate to see too big to fail. I would hate to see Bitcoin banks gather together, and instead of allowing creative destruction and allowing the market, which has created so much wealth and so much prosperity in every other sector, be stomped when it comes to currency. We've had no innovations in currency prior to Bitcoin for the last hundreds of years. This is really unfortunate. Currency is too important to let stagnate and to be controlled by government. So, for example, you had Mt. Gox, a huge Bitcoin exchange, which failed spectacularly. People lost millions of dollars of wealth. But unfortunately, that's part of creative destruction, and it has to be allowed to happen, because if it's not allowed to happen, then you have what happened with American banking, with the US dollar banking system, where risk is consolidated. And so you truly do get these huge risk-intense institutions which are not allowed to fail, which are bailed out. The purpose of a bank is to transfer risk from individuals to institutions. What we've done in America is we've then transferred the risk back onto individuals in the form of taxation. And those individuals have not been willing participants in taking that risk on. So let's not make those same mistakes when it comes to Bitcoin. Ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen with Bitcoin, the currency. I think it would be a little absurd to say, in a way, that the very first major entrant into the peer-to-peer decentralized currency game is it. I would like to see, again, creative destruction in the cryptocurrency space, more currencies, innovations in currency, better currencies. But regardless, I truly believe that peer-to-peer decentralized currency is the future. I think it's a brilliant innovation. I think it's really important. I think it's really useful. And so I think that if nothing else, I want everyone to have the option of using it. I want everyone to know how to use it. And so the last thing I'll say is a message to the Federal Reserve. Your power to control our destinies through our currency is limited now. Take heed. Thank you.
I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions about Bitcoin. No question about it. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the economy generally and how this kind of ties into Federal Reserve policy. Congressman Stutzman talked about the farm economy, which has been doing incredibly well. When I look at the U.S. economy, though,